Hello and welcome, I'm Riz Khan. While the world leaders debate the future state of the oceans during the latest COP event in Azerbaijan, my guest on this episode is a remarkable young man who's already making a major positive impact on the ocean environment. The Dutch entrepreneur Boyan Slat has been a CEO for over a decade. He's devoted more than half of his life to saving the planet from plastic, and yet he only recently reached the age of 30. Boyan's non-profit company, Ocean Cleanup, has been on an ambitious mission to rid the seas and rivers of plastic since 2013. It has invented technology that's transforming the pollution of our seas and rivers, and its work is saving wildlife, fisheries, tourism, and economies. Ocean Cleanup is also preventing plastic from entering the food chain and ultimately ending up on our own plates.
We can clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 10 years' time at a cost of $7.5 billion. So that's less than half of what America is spending on Halloween decorations on an annual basis.
In a wide-ranging conversation, we discussed how achievable Boyan's mission is today. Plus, I got a glimpse inside the mind of a driven and determined young innovator who entered the record books at just 14 after experimenting with rockets and explosives. Boyan, great to have a chance to have a chat. Now, many would argue you can't put a price on having clean oceans, but you've effectively done just that. You recently revealed your assessment of how long it will take to complete your mission to remove plastic from the seas and how much it will cost. Now, people might be surprised by the numbers, so tell me what you know.
Sure, yeah. So at the current level of performance, so basically what we have already achieved to date, we can clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 10 years' time at a cost of $7.5 billion. So that's less than half of what America is spending on Halloween decorations on an annual basis. Now, so I think, it's compared to a world problem, it's something that we should be able to afford. However, we were also looking to do it even faster and even cheaper. So by improving the way we detect where the highest concentrations of plastic are inside of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, we think we can actually do it in just 5 years' time at a cost of $4 billion. So yeah, really now for the first time ever, we know what it will take to return the Pacific Ocean to its clean and pristine state.
That's a fascinating comparison, literally half of the Halloween decorations in the US.
Yep.
But give me this perspective, because there are always skeptics out there. Why do you see this as value for money? What else could you get for that amount?
Yeah, so I think it's important to put it in the context of not cleaning the ocean, right? And according to a study done by Deloitte a couple of years ago, the plastic pollution problem as a whole is costing humanity up to $19 billion per year. And if you take into account all the ecosystem services that the ocean is providing, you're actually looking north of $500 billion in terms of harm that the pollution is doing to our ocean every year. So if you think in terms of ROI, it's way cheaper to clean the ocean than to not clean the ocean.
Let me ask you about this, because obviously there's a trail involved. How does plastic get from the factory to the ocean?
Yes, every year humanity uses roughly 400 million tons of plastic per year. During its use, it's providing a lot of value to humanity. It's a versatile material. It's an energy efficient material as well. But unfortunately, not all of that plastic gets collected and processed in a responsible way. So you'll have essentially leakage from the system. And some of that plastic is able to end up in our waterways, so in rivers in particular. And through rivers, it then ends up in the ocean. So, and we're talking about quite a small fraction. So less than 0.5% of the plastic that's being used ends up in rivers and flows into the ocean. But of course, that 0.5% is able to do a tremendous amount of harm to the environment, to coastal economies, and also to humanity in terms of the potential health risks of that plastic ending up in our food chain.
Isn't that amazing? It's such a small percentage, yet so important. We'll talk more about the important role of rivers in transporting plastic waste to the sea. Give us some idea of what happens when it gets there.
So once plastic is in the ocean, actually most of it only stays in the ocean for a relatively short time. So the majority will end up back on shore, on coastlines, washes up in a matter of weeks to months. And of course, that's still not a good thing, right? Because it damages tourism. Coastlines are also important ecosystems. But effectively, it does most of it removes itself from the ocean in a relatively short amount of time. But some plastic is able to make its way all the way to the open ocean, where if it does, it will end up in one of the five gyres. So that's an area where ocean currents converge, where plastic can enter, but it can never leave. And out of those five oceanic gyres that exist on Earth, the largest one is in the North Pacific, and that's also the most polluted one. So more than half of the world's plastic pollution that's stuck in the ocean can be found in that one, and that's of course the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Plastic accumulates in huge subtropic oceanic areas called gyres. Massive circular currents that trap the plastic for decades, if not centuries. There are 5 gyres in our oceans. The most polluted and best studied is the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch, located in the North Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and California.
It's interesting, Sarge, explain for our viewers, gyre you mean by almost like a gyroscopic swirl of water, and the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is something that I remember discussing years ago. What is it? What would you want people to know about that, and what do you remember about encountering it for the first time?
Yeah, so it's so if we take the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is the largest accumulation of trash on Earth, this is an area that spans an area 3 times the size of France. It contains more than 100 million kilos of plastic. And what's really fascinating is when we take that plastic out and we look at the age of the plastic, we see that a lot of it is actually very old plastic, because again, once it's there to stay. It's stuck indefinitely until of course, it ends up in the stomach of a fish or whatnot. But in principle, it's there to stay for a very long time. So we even see stuff dating back to the 1960s that are still. We even have had a Vietnam War drinking bottle from the U.S. Army that we found in still recognizable shape, still floating around out there in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So that really goes to show that why we have to go out there and clean it up. Sure, of course, it's essential to prevent more plastic from entering the ocean. But if that's the only thing we do, the ocean will be polluted forever, because those ocean garbage patches, they persist, and that's why I have to go out and clean this up.
Let's go back to rivers, and you'd mentioned a little bit about rivers playing, in terms of small percentage, but quite a high role, or quite an important role in all this. What are the numbers we should know about the pollution in rivers?
Yeah. So firstly, again, it's just a very small fraction of all the world's plastic that is being consumed that ends up in the ocean. And what's also fascinating is that those emissions are very concentrated in really just a small fraction of the world's rivers. So what we found in a study we published a few years ago is that just 1% of the world's rivers is responsible for roughly 80% of all the plastic that ends up in the ocean. So with a relatively sort of targeted intervention, intercepting the plastic in those 1% of the world's rivers, we can really stop most of the world's plastic emissions from polluting the ocean. Now, that 1% still accounts for 1,000 rivers, right? So it's still a big scope, but the good thing is that they are concentrated in a relatively small number of coastal cities, especially in middle-income countries. So Southeast Asia, West Africa, Latin America. Those are really the plastic pollution hotspots. So those are countries where there's now enough wealth to consume a lot of packaged goods wrapped in plastic. So you have a lot of waste generation, but where the infrastructure to then take care of that waste is really lacking. And just to give some more color to that, there's one river in Guatemala that we're operating in, where that one river is actually responsible for more plastic emissions to the oceans than all the developed countries combined. Just one river. So that's why we focus our work in those places where the problem is biggest, and where we can have essentially the biggest bang for our buck.
Boyan's interest, you could say obsession, with plastic waste in the seas was famously triggered by a scuba diving trip to Greece as a teenager. You'll know the expression, "I can't see the wood for the trees." Well, Boyan couldn't see the fish for the plastic bags, but he could see a problem and he had a vision to solve it. But his problem-solving appetite had begun at an even earlier age. I'd like to roll back the years and talk about the start of your incredible journey as someone who seemed, well, I guess, incredibly curious, driven and determined from a very early age. Your explorations involved explosives, launching rockets. At one point, you almost burnt down your family home.
Correct. Yeah. My mom didn't particularly like that phase. But yeah, I've always been very fascinated about technology and making things, building things, and so I've never been bored as a child, and always had my projects, right? So I had my own chemistry experiments, built my own computers. Actually, going all the way back, when I was 2, I used some wood and hammer and nails to make my own chair. So always been had this urge to build and create. Indeed, when I was 12 or 13, I was really into some model rockets, and I decided to set a Guinness World Record by launching more than 200 of them at the same time. Again, not very useful, but it was just the way I kept myself busy. And sort of asking myself a question, what if I could do this? Could I have this idea? Could I make that happen? That's probably the thing I've always asked myself throughout my childhood. And it's also the type of question that I asked myself when I was 16 years old. When scuba diving in Greece, came across more plastic bags than fish. And I asked myself, why can't I clean this up? So I kind of see this as a continuation of my childhood.
Now, Boyan, a key moment in your journey was a TED Talk in which you laid out your ideas and it went viral. Tell me about that feedback you had from that TED Talk and the realization that there were people out there who did share your passion.
So please, don't tell me we can't clean this up together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so at the time when I did that presentation, I was studying aerospace engineering at university here, and I had this idea. I had the opportunity to present that idea at this TEDx presentation. And a few months passed, and there wasn't really any traction. And at that point in time, I actually thought, like, okay, to give this idea any chance of success, I should probably drop out of university, dedicate all my time to this. And then again, few tough months followed. I approached 300 companies for help and sponsorship, and only one replied. And that person said, "This is a terrible idea. You should go back to school." So that was hard. But then suddenly there was some news blog that picked up the story, embedded the video of my presentation, and suddenly this blew up. And within no time, this video was watched, I think, over 1 million times. And that then allowed me to assemble an initial team, back then still volunteers, and also run a crowdfunding campaign to get the seed money to get started.
That crowdfunding campaign raised a staggering $2 million with tens of thousands of donations from more than 150 countries. Ocean cleanup was launched, but it would have to navigate through stormy weather on its voyage to save the seas.
It took us 8 years to finally have a system that worked. And throughout that time, we've had so many near-death experiences of almost running out of money, systems that broke down. I think we've done a few hundred prototype tests until we had something that worked. So it's So I remember vividly. We launched that new system. It was summer 2021. We deployed in the patch. And then actually the first tests, they didn't look very good. We were only collecting like a very small pile of trash. And it was just another one of those moments like, where did we mess up? Why is it not working again this time? And then, a few days later, we deployed the system again. We took the system back on deck. We emptied it out. And there was just this. So I woke up in the morning and I opened my phone and I see all these missed message calls and text messages. And I opened up my phone and I saw this photo of this massive mountain of plastic on deck. And that's definitely one of the biggest highlights. It's like almost like all of the pain of the 8 years was made it worth it for that brief moment when we finally knew we had a system that worked and that we could clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And by the way, it just turned out that we were in essentially sort of an empty part of the garbage patch in those first days. So we were essentially being fooled by the density of plastic. So that was a tremendous relief. And then of course we just got better and better to now the point that we can actually get the job done in just a couple of years' time.
I know you've been constantly working to improve your cleanup operation. I wonder how effective is the current system you have in contrast to your early attempts?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey to get to this point. It was 2018 when we launched our first system, which firstly didn't collect plastic, which was quite an important requirement for an ocean cleanup system. It also broke into two, which again was sort of as we like to refer to it as an unscheduled learning opportunity. So we learned a lot from those early days, early failures. But now fast forward to today, we have this massive 1.5 mile long cleanup system with which we can actually clean an area the size of a football field every 5 seconds. So it is tremendously effective. Now it's really about scaling it up. So we know it can be done. We have now given humans the tool we need to clean it up. But now it's really about who is willing to make it happen and fund the expansion to a whole fleet of systems with which we then are able to clean up the whole ocean.
That's fascinating, Boyan. So literally a football pitch in 5 seconds. But I guess when you're talking of a patch 3 times the size of France, that's a lot of football pitches.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We've had one system out there for the past 3 years doing all the testing and development work. And in that time, we've swept an area roughly the size of New Jersey. So, it does add up over time, of course, but to really clean up the ocean in 5 years' time, what you're going to need is a fleet of systems, roughly 20 of them, which is, and then once you have that, you can actually clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
I was blown away by when you said you'd found literally kind of old plastic, such as I think you said a plastic bottle from the Vietnam War in the garbage patch. So I wonder, what are some of the strangest things your team has recovered from the ocean?
Yeah, it's looking at our trash, it's like modern day archaeology. It's always super interesting to see what we collect. And we also post these on our social media, so definitely recommend to check that out. But it's everything. It's stuff ranging from mannequins to golf balls to astroturf, plastic toys, dolls' houses. It's it's wild to see what's out there.
It might seem likely that local and national governments would support efforts towards cleaner rivers, beaches, and fisheries, but it's not always the case. What about the business world or plastic manufacturers? And what role do we have as consumers? I wanted to find out who's helping the Ocean Cleanup Project and who's not.
So when it comes to these ocean garbage patches, the issue is that it's international waters. What's interesting is that, for example, if you look at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, we are able to link the plastic to the 5 big industrialized countries in the North Pacific. So I think there is a case to be made that they should step up and take at least some responsibility for this. When it comes to rivers, so what we do there is we put systems in those most polluting rivers to catch it before it can reach the ocean. We're currently already stopping about 2% of the emissions. We are in 16 rivers around the world and in 8 countries. But doing those first projects, it does take time to build up those relationships with governments. And I must say, I've never really felt an unwillingness to support. Governments recognize that there is this problem, and they welcome the collaboration, and we support them. And in many places, they actually operate the interceptors, so that makes it financially sustainable on the long term as well. Right. But governments are just large and bureaucratic, so they are quite slow generally, right? So getting the permits to deploy, getting the contract secured, that usually is the limiting factor in how fast we can roll out our interceptor projects.
And yet it's an international problem. So how are global institutions like the United Nations helping you tackle it?
So we do have a partnership with the United Nations Development Program, who help open doors with those national governments. I think what's quite interesting, of course, we would welcome the support of the UN. And I think especially when you talk about the ocean garbage patches, it is an international problem, and this waste just travels through many different countries and their waters, right? But what's interesting about the river problem is that you don't need any altruism, or you don't need any international cooperation to get this done, because actually the biggest victim of the pollution that flows out of Indonesia's rivers is Indonesia, right? And the biggest victim of Panama's pollution is Panama, because most of that trash will stay in those coastal waters, will wash up on shore, and therefore there's just a selfish economic reason for these countries to step up and intercept that plastic before it goes into the ocean, which I think is a good thing, because international cooperation is notoriously difficult. So I do expect governments to be much faster in adopting what we do in rivers than international waters.
Boyan, how about a little finger pointing here? How about the business world? Are the plastic manufacturers searching for solutions, or are they actually continuing to add to the problem they help to create?
Yeah, well, at the Ocean Cleanup, we are about solutions. We don't point fingers. But at the same time, I think, be it governments, be it plastic producers, be it the companies that use the plastic that produce the packaging, the Coca-Colas of this world, and even the users of the plastic. I think everyone has played a role in creating this problem, and therefore I think everyone also should have the opportunity to really be part of the solution. So, I think if there's any industry that has benefited from all this cheap plastic and the production of it, they are the plastic producers and the companies that use it, and therefore I do think they should play a very big role in making this cleanup happen. And actually, the interesting thing is the cost of cleaning up the world's oceans is less than 1% of the net profits of the world's plastic producing companies over the course of the cleanup. So there's no doubt that they should be able to afford it. I think it's really about, are they willing to step up and grab this opportunity?
It's interesting, yeah. It's, I guess, a very good approach not to point fingers, because you want to coerce them, or at least to convince them to come on board. Now, I was going to say, on the other hand, there is that opportunity for green investment and sponsorship, and saving the planet can be seen as a cool thing for a business to be doing. So how well are you benefiting from that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, I think if you like forcing people to do things is generally not a very successful strategy. Indeed, I'd like to turn it around and say, this is like an Apollo project for Earth, right? This is something that in 50 years from now, children will be learning about in school, and they will be learning who helped make this thing happen. So I think it's it's something you should want to be part of. It's like extremely exciting adventure, and I think there's a huge reputational and also litigation risk associated with this problem. We're learning more and more every day about the health impacts that this plastic in the environment is doing. There is the harm it's doing to countries and ecosystems. I think if these companies want to be ahead of that game, I think they should have an interest in this problem, that this problem goes away. And at least I can't think of any sort of faster and cheaper way to make the problem go away than by intercepting this plastic in rivers to prevent it from going into the ocean, and by cleaning up the legacy pollution that's already in the ocean garbage patches.
And what's really nice, Boyan, is that it's not just a Western lens that's on this. I gather Kia, the car manufacturer, South Korean, is one of those that's very keen to get involved.
That's right, yeah. So we're very proud that Kia is actually one of the first companies that have stepped up, and with whom we have a partnership of significant size, where, of course, they contribute financially to enabling our work, but they also get access to the plastic we take out of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So there is actually some of this plastic will find its way back into the electric cars that Kia is producing. It's in our interest that our plastic doesn't. There's no risk that this stuff ends up back in the environment. So we want this to go into durable, sustainable products. And I think the Kia partnership is a great example of that. And another one is that we recently announced that the next vinyl record that Coldplay is releasing, that there will be an edition of that record that is made out of the plastic that we've taken out of rivers. So I think that's another sort of cool aspect of what we do, and it also allows us to for this story to reach more and more people.
I was wondering about that. Well, now you collected all that rubbish. What are you going to do, and how much economic value is there from recycling? And of course, I think Coldplay's been a big supporter for quite a while now as well, haven't they? And I gather you're making sunglasses, rather expensive sunglasses too.
Yeah, so we made these actually as a
there you go.
proof of concept. So this is 100% made out of the plastic we've collected from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now we're not a sunglass company, right? So for us, it was really to prove to people that this is not rubbish. This is something you can actually make beautiful, useful things at. Of course, it's the economics of recycling generally are very challenging, right? It's because plastic is so cheap. It's very often cheaper to make stuff out of new plastic rather than reuse the plastic that already exists. However, of course, the thing that we add to the materials is the story value. So, Kia is willing to pay, the millions for that plastic, not because they are in need of plastic, but because they want to be able to tell that story when they, sell their electric cars, right? So it's so that way we think it does provide an extra way for companies that join our mission to talk about what they do with the ocean cleanup.
And it's a very powerful way as well. Now, let's ask you how we as individuals could be involved. What should we be doing to help resolve the plastic problem?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on where you live on Earth. So I think if you live in a sort of middle-income country, the issue is that waste collection is limited, and where the waste goes sometimes are illegal dumps, right? But it's, of course, it's very hard to do something about that as an individual. But of course, you can make sure that at least you pay for the waste collection and that your waste gets collected rather than that you have to dump it. I think in richer countries, it's just there's not the risk that your plastic ends up in the environment, as long as you don't litter, is just so tiny that basically the best thing you could do is actually support organizations like the Ocean Cleanup to address those interventions to the places where the problem actually is happening.
The Ocean Cleanup team has encountered plenty of doubters, skeptics and critics over the years, as well as praise and prizes for its work. I was keen to know what Boyan had taken on board from that feedback and how his current work may influence his future direction as he considers looking ahead to his role as a global influencer. I understand you receive a lot of messages from schools and individuals around the world. So tell me about some of those messages that might have moved you or inspired you.
It's been humbling to receive the amount of support we've received, of course, ranging from big corporations and billionaires that give us funding all the way to the school children that write letters to us. And I think I'm a big believer in that when it comes to environmental problems in general, we're going to get out of this not by protesting or fighting against modernity, being against technology or business, etc., but rather to create solutions through which humanity can fulfill its needs and desires without having the negative side effects of destroying the environment. So I'm pro-environment, but I'm also pro-human, and I think if you're not, it's going to lead to solutions that are actually not solutions, because humanity is going to reject them, and they're just not going to work. So, and I think what gives me a lot of hope is to see that that I get letters from young people that that decided not to glue themselves to the street or do that sort of approach to solving problems, but actually to channel that energy in a constructive way, to start projects, to start companies, to choose a certain study through which they can become an inventor and work on new forms of energy generation, and just naming some examples. So
right.
It's so it's I think many people, there's a lot of pessimism in the world these days, especially amongst young people, and especially about the environment, and giving them hope that problems are nothing more than things that need to be solved. I think that motivates them to actually get to work on them rather than end up in despair.
How concerned are you about the effect of climate change on oceans in terms of rising tides and collapsing currents, which some people believe could actually lead to a new ice age in Europe?
Look, I think it's all about timescales, right? So I think when it comes to human timescales, I think some of these scenarios are still quite far away. But then if you look at the geological timescales, 100 years is nothing, right? And I would love to see humanity thrive not just for the next 100 years, but for the next 100,000 years or 100 million years, right? So I think in that light, we do live, I think, in a very special slice of time where the Industrial Revolution is essentially yesterday on a geological timescale, right? And that has given us a tremendous amount of wealth, and I'm immensely grateful for those who came before me and created the modern world. But we haven't achieved technological maturity yet as a civilization. We still have the problems. We still haven't managed the side effects, when it comes to the pollution, the CO2 emissions, etc., that this modern civilization is creating. So I think I think that is a key challenge that we have in this century. And of course, if we don't solve it in this century, the longer you wait, the harder it is. So I think I don't think the world ends in 10 years. At the same time, I do think these are real problems, and I think we can solve them if we do what humanity is good at.
A lot of people would be interested to know the average age of a CEO among Fortune 500 companies is 57. Now, you came onto the scene with a bang, literally, as a teenager, and you recently turned 30, and you've already accomplished so much. So what else do you have in store for the world?
Actually, it's terrible turning 30 is, and it's like, I'm really starting to feel very old, actually. But
thanks. I'm double your age.
No offense. It's it's just it's just to me, the ocean cleanup. I think plastic pollution is a huge problem, and I think it will be an immense victory for humanity if we are able to solve this problem that's literally covering 2/3 of our planet. If we can send that to the history books, I think it's going to be huge, and that's what motivates me every day. At the same time, I hope that what we do at the Ocean can be essentially sort of a blueprint of how we solve problems in the 21st century. And of course, I hope that the Ocean Cleanup's goal is to help itself out of business at some point in time. All these systems should be deployed, clean it up, and then at that point in time, I hope I have the opportunity to work on many other problems. There's not a shortage of ideas. It's really about having to focus now on this problem. But who knows? In a few years from now, I really hope I get to work on some other problems.
Isn't it ironic that your biggest success would be to put yourself out of business? That is interesting.
Yeah,
that you achieve it.
It was actually quite funny. Like I'm not aware of any other nonprofit that makes that explicit. While I think the majority of nonprofits, they are about solving a problem, right? So that should be their whole goal. Their whole reason to exist is to help yourself out of business. But so I really hope that more nonprofits should make that explicit.
Well, on the note of like other people getting involved, another European CEO, Spotify's Daniel Ek, has put $1 billion of his own money into a startup fund to tech Moonshots. Now, how much does it excite you when you see other tech-minded entrepreneurs seeking to solve global problems?
I think it's brilliant. And what's interesting, I think philanthropy has a unique, or I think entrepreneurs have a unique role to play because they are, they tend to be quite tolerant to risk. And I think what to have the greatest impact, you don't want to invest in the sort of safe bets because those things will happen anyway. I think what the Ocean Cleanup was when we started was really a sort of high risk, high rewards opportunity where the chance of the Ocean Cleanup succeeding 10 years ago was super tiny. But of course, if we were to pull it off, it would have this huge impact. And I think we need more bets like that. Even if you just look at the energy problem, having very cost-effective and scalable energy storage. That's something that we don't have yet. Cost-effective ways of producing things like steel and cement in a way that doesn't cause pollution doesn't really exist yet. It's not cost-effective, at least. So I think to solve those things, what we need are those kind of bets that are sort of high risk, high rewards, and people like Daniel, they're in they have an immense opportunity to support those things that governments tend not to do because it's still too early stage or too risky.
Well, a quick final thought then. Your ocean journey was triggered by the amount of plastic you saw in the sea while scuba diving in Greece. You touched on that briefly. Now, if you were to go back there today, or perhaps in 10 years, what difference do you hope or perhaps expect to see?
Yeah, I think saying about 5 to 7 years, I think all going well. And if we find the support that we need to now scale up the solutions, the solutions work, it's about scaling up now. But if we find those champions that are willing to help us make this scale, I think 5 to 7 years from now, is there any 16-year-old can go scuba diving anywhere on Earth and come across more fish than plastic bags.
Actually see the fish.
That's a future to look forward to, I think. Yeah.
Well, Boyan Slat, thank you so much. You may be the youngest guest. You are the youngest guest we've had on our show since we launched. But I think you have one of the most powerful messages. So more power to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The remarkable Boyan Slat. It'll be fascinating to see what he does with his next 30 years on the planet. I'm Riz Khan. From me and the team, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.